From an early age, this morning's guest was focused on what he wanted to be. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on All American People. Good morning. Welcome to All American People. This morning we're at Villa Romana, the 5-time winner of the Italian Restaurant of the Year. We're focused on the 20th anniversary of the production of South Carolina's first indigenous made-for-TV movie, Storm Clouds. And we're visiting with its director and editor, Scott Lineberger. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, Red. Good to meet you.
How exciting to get you in.
It's great to be here. It's unusual to be on this side of the camera, but I'll do my best.
And you've had many, many years, 25 plus years now on that side of the camera.
That's right.
I mean, on the other side of the camera, excuse me.
That's right.
The excitement for you of 20 years of celebrating the production of Storm Clouds, I think you said later it was distributed in 1992, but actually 1991, a lot of production going on.
Well, it's exciting for two reasons. One, it brings back really excellent memories, and the other thing is it makes me realize how old I'm getting. So, you know, it's good and bad, I guess.
Well, I think if I lean forward, you'll see a lot more gray up here than on you, and you've got a few years on me, so that's a good sign. You must be staying relatively calm and at ease.
Something's working.
Yes, yes. How exciting. And for you, Scott, what originally got you to South Carolina?
I was born in the countryside outside of Orlando, Florida, obviously, and pretty much thought I was going to be there my entire life. Although, at 11, my mother passed away from cancer. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of memories of her. And then, ironically, a year and a half later, I lost my father to a heart attack. And the really good thing about that time was that he retired immediately, and we had an excellent year and a half. You know, hunting, fishing, going to visit family.
Right.
So I could never, you know, thank him enough for taking that time.
Right.
I mean, I look at how busy we are today, and
Right.
I realized that was a sacrifice on his part, but I'll never forget those times.
Right.
But they actually had planned. I was a bonus baby. There's 13 years between me and my next oldest
Is
sibling.
that right?
Yeah.
13.
So I was a surprise.
Wow.
I'm quite sure. But they had actually put into their wills a provision in case they passed away before I was, you know, of age, and never thinking that that would actually happen.
Right.
But when they did, my sister and I had always had a close relationship. She's 16 years older, and I moved up to live with them in Charleston. Her and her husband and my niece and nephew, who sort of became like my little sister and little brother.
Right.
By grafting that family together. But I guess by making that move from really out in the sticks to a fairly good-sized city,
Sure.
being exposed to a lot more things, I was able to see more of a vision for what my future could be, I think. I had played around with 8mm cameras and actually shot some with my father and mother, which they totally hated, but you know, it was my practice. But I did that, and I knew I had a feel for it, a skill for it, and I was going to probably look at it as a hobby more than a vocation. But actually went to Georgia Tech for a year, and thinking that again it was going to be my hobby.
Right.
And Georgia Tech whittled me down pretty quickly from being what I thought was pretty smart to I'll see you later. So in fact, I took the only film-related course Georgia Tech offered.
Is that right?
And I said, you know, this is what I need to be doing because I love doing this. I may not make as much money being, you know, like as an engineer or something.
Right.
But so I did that and ended up at USC in Carolina, you know, Columbia.
Right.
And just fell in love with it. And it gets
they have a film and TV program there at the University of South Carolina that's probably one of the tops around.
It is, and mine was the Department of Media Arts,
right,
which really gave me a wide basis of exposure to still photography, audio production, even slideshow production back then, film and video production. So you really got a little bit of everything. I was very fortunate to be at the same time working with a company in town called Kingfisher Productions.
Kingfisher there in Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Who, they were doing better production than anybody in the state, literally at that time. 35 millimeter motion picture film. Mm-hmm. Their average spot, they would leave the house between $50,000 and $100,000 per commercial.
Wow.
So the experience that I got with them was invaluable. I mean, I was learning some things in school, but to be hands-on.
Right.
And I was able to work up to being production manager fairly soon, within a few months of being there.
Wow, while you were still a student at University of South Carolina.
Exactly, and it was a small unit of people on staff.
Right.
Now on shoots we'd have upwards of 30, 35 people as a crew. And as production manager I would have to organize and motivate a lot of times and keep on schedule that many people.
Golly,
but that was invaluable training for what was to come later.
Right.
So those times were, you know, how you look back and some things are just so important you don't realize them necessarily at the time.
Right. Oh yeah.
But I learned so much in those early days, and can't thank those folks enough for giving me the opportunity, because I was a young guy, and I was, you know, basically ordering around folks twice my age.
Markedly right, sure.
But they, you know, they respected that as an extension of the company and gave me a chance to do that. And
as you look back on that, literally 25 years ago, what is it about you that you think they saw in you as a college student that gave them the feeling that they could move you up the ranks, potentially to set the stage as production manager there at Kingfisher? What was it about you? You've got a real eye, you can see things, you can handle people well. What do you think set the stage for them to really recognize your value?
I think there's some people skills there, but when I showed up on their doorstep, I said, you guys are going to hire me. I mean, I don't care if I sweep the floors, you guys are going to hire me.
Wow.
And I think it was that they were kind of taken aback by that.
Right.
But in a good way. It was my aggressive, I guess, working towards my goals, which they needed, because when you're in production, even at that level, is even as much as $2,000 or $3,000 an hour. So when you've got a full day to get things done, you can't waste time. So
yeah, sure.
You got to have somebody who's aggressive and intelligent to plan things out. So I guess they saw that in me. Not really sure what they saw in me, but I think the fact that I really just said, you know, you guys are going to hire me. I want to work here. I think that, first of all, opened their eyes, and then they gave me a chance.
When viewers look at commercials, how do you see a commercial and tell what's the difference between a $15,000 commercial or a $100,000 commercial?
Ironically, a lot of it has to do with who's in front of the camera.
Okay.
People look at local commercials typically, and they say that's a local commercial because it's cheesy, the production values are low.
Right.
But a lot of times we would cast people out of New York.
Okay.
Or Atlanta. And so we would bring in major talent.
Right.
And they, you know, all, just like you hear about, they had to be flown in first class, you know, per diems, this and that. So,
wow.
But to get these people in front of the camera, they brought it to life.
Right.
They brought it, whatever material to life you had in front of them.
Yeah.
You know, you could have them read the phone book and they'd make it exciting.
Right.
So these were top-notch talent, and the crew, because we developed about 30, 35 folks that we used every time.
They're in the Columbia area.
In the Columbia area.
Right.
Some as far as North Carolina, you know, but basically that same area. And we honed that to where, you know, people would interact with each other, not necessarily even have to talk about things because they're so much working well together. So it was that, I guess, the synergy of doing things right, doing things as excellent as you could.
Sure. And
the talent in front of the camera that just would convince people. If it's a commercial, you got to be convinced.
Yeah.
If you don't think that guy's really what he is, you've already turned the channel.
Sure.
But if you really believe what they're saying, then you're probably going to listen.
You'll support that product. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That is fascinating. You found a real love there at the University of South Carolina in the Media Arts program and said, this is, I mean, you're talking about ages of late teens, early 20s. You're deciding what you're going to do the rest of your life, essentially.
Yeah, and actually, when I first moved up with my sister, I went, you know, new school and
in Charleston.
Harder things to get used to there. But one of the things I went to was a job fair. I met a fellow there named Don Moody, and he was a local, I guess, I'm not sure exactly what he did at the TV station, but he worked for Channel 4 in Charleston.
Right,
and he
CIV.
said, yeah, CIV. He said, you ought to come down and do an internship. Probably thinking I would never. I called him like the next week.
Right.
I was 16, and they really couldn't even have me in the program, but I came and I did an internship anyway over the summer. So really at age 16, it already got into my blood.
Right.
I mean, I was like, I was just, you know, I was done. I had to do this.
That is amazing.
So yeah, it gets in your blood, and that continues at the university when you'd have 16-hour days.
Right.
You go to classes and do production after that. And if you can't hang with that, you know, if you want your 8-hour day, you know, this is not the field to be in.
Right, right.
And the same thing with kingfisher shoots. Those shoots typically 14 to 16-hour days. And just that's the norm. And if you're doing an all-night shoot, sometimes you might work 24 hours. So.
Son of a gun. Well, of course, our focus is storm clouds and the 20th anniversary of the production of that, but I want to make sure we have a chance to talk about some of the years after you finished at USC in '87, cum laude. I think tremendous success there. Stayed there in the Midlands and the Columbia area. And even prior to storm clouds, you spent quite a bit of work not only with kingfisher, but otherwise really growing and working on some pretty amazing shoots. There must have been some that really stand out in your mind.
Yeah, probably the one that I was most fascinated with, both before and during and after, was a Chrysler commercial I worked on. You'd say, well, that's a car commercial, no big deal. It took a week to shoot this one commercial.
Wow.
And it was shot.
30-second commercial.
30-second commercial. And it was shot in what you call magic hour, which is that hour or so, you know, right after the dawn and right before dusk.
Right.
It's when the light is so beautiful. And these were guys all out of Hollywood. They hired a few of us locals, and it was shot on the Yorktown, actually.
Really?
And the premise was that a Chrysler was going to race a BMW on top of the Air Force carrier.
Right, right.
And you know, like the Chrysler was actually going to beat the BMW, and it was going to stop before the BMW. So that was, you know, a little cheesy, but
wow.
But it was beautifully shot. We had stunt people who would come out every morning and try and get as close to the edge by screeching, you know, as they could. We had divers in the water the whole time.
Right. 2
of each car in case one went in the water.
Right.
It was a $600,000 commercial at the time.
Wow.
So, you know, maybe $1.2 million now.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
And the best part of it, though, was it was a huge production. The best part of it was working with Bill Butler, who was directing that, but he was a DP. And he DP'd, he did director of photography.
Okay, yeah.
He did Jaws, Grease, several of the Rocky films.
No.
But very unassuming. And I was doing what was called video assist.
Right.
So it shot with Panavision cameras, but they would take a video tap out of the viewfinder so that the director could actually see what was being filmed.
Wow.
So this was very new technology back then. Now it's passe, you know, everybody does it. But back then, so I had a huge monitor that he would watch every take from, and I could also play back takes because I was recording it. But just to be able to work with him and see how he thought was just an invaluable experience. Plus all the crew, you know, film people are a very strange breed. They very unique usually, you know, just very diverse backgrounds, but they all sort of have this love, and you know, the shot is it.
And it comes across, yeah, much like the Kingfisher crew, that crew of 30 from that area and into the Tar Heel State. I mean, they really find a common bond there and just make it happen.
It comes down to the shot is the only thing that's important.
Right.
If you've got to hang out of a car while it's driving, if you got to do this or that, you prepare for 20 hours for a 10-second shot. That doesn't matter because the shot matters.
Wow.
So it's a strange way of looking at things, but it produces the incredible quality and what we see in Hollywood. You know.
Right.
So it was awesome to be able to work with those folks, and you just learn something on every shoot if you pay attention.
That must have been. And some other fascinating folks. Anyone else in particular that you work with that stands out in your mind? I know we want to get into storm clouds, but if there were any other folks, there was, I mean, any numbers of famous folks you may have worked with or other fascinating shoots? Well,
during that whole time period, there were a lot of these directors of photography that became directors.
Okay.
Because things were slowing down in Hollywood.
Right.
So Owen Roisman is another one. He shot The French Connection.
Oh, wow.
Tootsie, just several films.
Right.
But probably the thing that was the most enjoyable for me was when I was at Georgia Tech. I was in the media club, so see, I was still trying to get to media. And being an engineering school, we brought in James Doohan, who was Scotty on the original, the only Star Trek series, the original.
The only.
And he's, of course, the best engineer in the universe. So we brought him in to host, and he showed the blooper reel and all this thing. But since I was in the media club, we were able to go out to eat with him. Wow. So it was about 10 of us, and we sat around. He told us all these stories, and this was long before it was known that he and Captain Kirk, or William Shatner, did not get along at all.
Oh, wow.
So, but he kind of hinted at that. He says, had some trouble with some of the main actors, and really liked Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley. So you kind of okay.
You opened that door.
But if you think about it, in the original series, they didn't have many scenes really in the same room together.
Right.
And that kind of worked out that way.
That is wild, Scott.
But that was great. He was.
Are there things like that that happen on a regular basis on shoots? Are there people? Let's go ahead and segue into storm clouds. What were some of the things that really crop up? And actually, first, what is the significance of it being the first made-for-TV indigenous? When I say indigenous, explain to viewers the significance of the film.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of production in South Carolina for quite some time, and even a lot of feature films. But by indigenous, I'm saying that the funding, the producer, the writer, 90% of the crew, and most of the talent as well were all from South Carolina.
Wow.
So it came together, it was produced, and actually distributed, all based on our impetus from South Carolina.
That's incredible.
So it was, and I think because it was the first production like that, we got incredible support throughout the community, government, industry. There's some scenes in an oil refinery, which there was a company up there, and it had some of the same sort of pipes and tubing, and they gave us access at night, because it had to be a nighttime shot, into some of their most technical areas.
Wow.
I mean, I'm talking, we had a crew of 15 people every day, and then you add the talent on top of that. So let's say you're taking 30 people into a highly industrialized area. They gave us that for free.
Wow.
American Airlines, we needed a shot on the tarmac. They gave us a plane for an hour. That was $100,000 right there that we didn't have to pay.
Easily.
This is all pre-9/11, of course.
Right.
But we were able to shoot in the airport at Columbia, on the tarmac, from the plane. The South Carolina Arts Commission, their focus is just to support the arts in South Carolina and the artists. They gave us tremendous support. And of course the Film Office, who is the South Carolina Film Office, their main focus is to bring productions into the state.
You were already here.
But they were already, and so they helped us immensely. We even filmed in one of their offices. So, just everywhere we went, the fact that we mentioned that we were from South Carolina, that we're trying to make this happen, they opened, doors opened tremendously. And the crew, we got away from spending so much money on the crew, because it's independent, very low budget, well under $500,000 for the whole thing. And the crew, most of them were getting an upgrade. They weren't being paid much at all, sort of a token or a tribute, but they were receiving an upgrade. For instance, Phil Dan, who was the director of photography, he had been a first cameraman before that. So everybody got a bump. We had department heads, hair and makeup, costuming, sound, grip and lighting, and cinematography, and then several folks, 2 or 3 people in each department. So it was a very lean crew, but it was a challenge. When I was younger, there was 2 things. I knew I wanted to direct a film before I was 25, and I was 26 when I did this, so I was close.
Golly, Scott.
But anyone who knows me in those early days would know that I would say things like, I'd come out of a movie and I'd say, man, if you would just give me the film and the money to make that, I would make such a better film. I don't say that anymore, because I learned that that's like one of the hardest things in the world to do.
Wow.
You'd arrive on set, and every morning there'd be literally 15 people with questions relevant to different parts of the script. Is this the right wardrobe for this? Has the haircut changed? What side of the room are you going in and out of? All these things that just hit you.
And you have to think through each one and how they impact something else, a real domino effect constantly. There's probably a lot of challenges. Scott, we've only got about 5 minutes. We're running out of time. I've got a lot of questions to ask, but what are some of the challenges of doing an independent film like Storm Clouds?
The main thing is money.
Money.
You know, usually you don't have a lot of it, so you find ways to get around it, which the community support helped us tremendously.
Right.
Credibility, and having the film office behind us and the Arts Commission really gave us some of that credibility.
Sure.
Distribution. We distributed ourselves, which, you know, we're not distributors by any sense of the means, but we did that, and we released it in 50 markets, which represented about 30% of the Nielsen Universe.
Great.
So that was, we just went shy of getting, I think 40% was the point at which, you know, real distributors and advertisers would have, you know, that would have piqued their interest, like a Toyota or a Ford or something to actually sponsor the event. So as a result, we didn't make enough money back to do the next film. We actually shot another film, a horror film.
Really?
Which was a lot more fun.
Oh, yeah.
Horror films are a lot of fun. Bloody and all that.
Many of the same crew?
Many of the same crew.
Right.
And some of the same actors. But just unfortunately funds ran out. You know, we just could not finish that. So,
right. Were there some other unexpected, I guess with money being the principal challenge, were there some unexpected problems that cropped up?
The main thing was, since people weren't being paid a lot, you had to feed them well. So at least every day we knew we had a big meal, a huge meal, because, you know, film people eat a lot, and they work it all off.
Oh yeah.
But the other thing is working together. I mean, you got to be able to work close together with people you may not know that well for 16-hour days. And actually, that spawned a lot of relationships. And what I mean, there were people that on camera needed to kiss and didn't want to kiss, and there were people that weren't on camera that wanted to kiss and did kiss.
Oh wow!
And people, you know, it was funny. There was a lot of relationships came out of that.
Romances.
Yeah, out of that film. So
son of a gun.
Not sure how long they last, you know, but.
Do you keep up at all with some of the either the crew 20 years to this day, or even some of the actors or actresses?
I do. I hadn't kept up with them probably as much as I would like to have, but I've been following them on IMDb, the Internet Movie Database.
Sure. And
lots of these guys and women have been in 10 or 15 projects. Like, we were the first. It's really neat to scroll down their Storm Clouds and then to see all these Hollywood films that they've been working on.
That is amazing,
so that was neat to be at the beginning for a lot of their careers.
Absolutely, both the editor and director. That is incredible. Well, you know, when you think about the editing schedule and, of course, just the distribution schedule, the production schedule, we're running out of time, but just the significance of that for viewers.
Scheduling is probably one of the most important things in film. Now, with this film, we spent about 2 months in post-production, which is called offlining. And we did sort of a rough cut of the film, then that was refined, and then we went online, and then it was formatted for satellite distribution. All of these things really, I guess, allowed me to, you know, carrying these things forward with me. I'm able to think things through in a much more logical way than someone who hasn't had those experiences. I guess like anybody, you know, experience builds you. But I've been able to carry a lot of those things forward, and I'm excited to actually be involved in starting a company here just recently.
Yes.
That I'm able to, I guess, get a lot of those skills out to people in forms of commercial production.
Great.
And so I bring a lot to the table with that.
If a viewer wanted to learn more about some of those opportunities, what's the best way for them to get information about your newest company? They
could go to mistcatcher.com.
Okay.
MIST, and or 843-796-0054.
843-796-0054, mistcatcher.com. Well, there's a lot of other questions I wanted to ask. Obviously, how 9/11 impacted you in the industry, but we've run out of time. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, Scott.
Enjoyed it.
How exciting. Stay tuned for a little more with Scott Lineberger coming up next. 29 long days of filming with a crew of more than 15. We're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the production, but think about it, all to get the shot, the right shot. You heard Scott talk about those, all the efforts coming in for just 10 seconds, oftentimes on a 30-second commercial. In this instance, it's an entire movie. the shot after the shot after the shot. Think about all those efforts. You can get a little tease of the movie at mistcatcher.com. Mistcatcher.com. Go online, take a look at storm clouds, and celebrate with so many others throughout the Palmetto and the Tar Heel State and throughout the Southeast. Those 51 markets that got a piece of storm clouds. Scott, thanks so much for that.